My name is Reid Redden, and I'm the sheep and goat specialist for Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. What I want is our consumers, the people that interact with our consumers, to see this land and this landscape and how it's this land that have kept the animals alive and the people living on this land for 130 years. And so the Hillingdon Ranch, the Giles family, are a prime example for that. And so this story, I think, is a fantastic story.
Grandpa started buying this country in about 1885. It was terribly overgrazed by cattle in those days. To get control of those cattle, he bought the brand. The guy guaranteed him 200 head on the brand. At that time, cattle were worth about $6 a head. So Grandpa paid him $1,200 for his brand. That means he owned everything with that brand on it. So he got the brand for $1,200, and by the time they got through getting all those cattle gathered and sold, or got them off of here, he ended up with over 600 head. The point is, people didn't know what they had. How are they going to manage what they didn't know what they had? Grandpa knew he needed to get control of the animals that were on this land. First thing was get these animals that he had no control of off. The grass had been taken away, the fires had gone because the fuel had gone. This country evolved under fire, kept it very open. And when Grandpa got here, the main thing he saw was the brush was taking over, and brush is the small trees. They was shading the land, and there was very little places for grass to grow. The ostrich of the time was an Angora goat, so he joined that group and bought Angora goats, brought Angora goats on here, and we know he had fairly large herds by 1890. Those goats are still here. You saw them kidding in those fields coming up. The goats started controlling the brush and opening up the country to where more grass grew. Grandpa had brought 3 registered Angus cows on this place in 1885. Every cow on this place is kin to those 3 cows. All that means is we've had them all along. But we've spent most of our time with all of our animals selecting the animals that are adapted to this environment, so they do not need any outside feed, any very little medicine, and the most important thing, very little labor. Here's our staff. There's Carol, the matriarch here, Grant, and where's Misty? Oh, right here. There's the staff right here. That's the only full-time staff on something like 20,000 acres at times. So we're running like chickens, and the girls know everything. They know everything that's going on, just like we try to clue each other in because we're all going different directions. So the goats got here about 1890, the sheep got here about 1910. That's when sheep were very popular, wool was valuable, and they brought merino sheep in here. And then they've gone through all kinds of changes. They became the Delaine Merino, the Rambouillet came along, Debouillet. About 50 years ago, we could not find animals anywhere else that were as adapted to this land as our own. Meaning, they needed so much more care than we had the time to give them. And so we have not brought any outside blood that stayed in our sheep and goats for over 50 years now. But we have more vigorous, more adapted animals, more predictable animals. And then we tried, when we get them adapted and we constantly breed on that, then we tweak them. We sonogram them to have those individuals that have more meat in them. We also, when we sonogram, we get a fat layer on them. That fat layer is very important because they're coming out of hills. They have not been fed anything but what grows on those hills naturally. The ones with the greatest fat layer are the most adapted. Those animals that are going to put that fat layer on, when it comes time to ovulate, they're going to double ovulate and they're going to have twins. And twins are a lot more profitable than singles on the sheep. We're lambing and kidding in 18 pastures right now. We have 30, we counted, I hadn't even counted it. Grant counted up, we have 37 pastures. And we're in at least 20 of them most of the time. But our animals are moving. Right now they're staying put till their babies can travel with them. So right now we're at the most stationary time that the animals ever see, because we got to get babies up to where they're following their mothers and they don't lose them when they go into the big pasture. Right now, with all these ewes lambing and all these pastures and these nannies kidding, we're hunting for little holes under the fence. No, not where they're getting out. A deal like this, and that might have been what it, a coyote will come up here and he will dig under that fence. And he will make something, and you can see those scratch marks and everything. If you get many of those coming in there, by the time you go to get those lambs, there's not any. And we hope to catch that coyote. But he's a whole lot smarter than us. He wins about 100 times in a row. But when we win, that game's over. We go to another coyote. But last year we caught 110. Which is a lot of coyotes. It only, one coyote can take all the profit out of that pasture. If he eats on them the whole time they're on those ewes, there will be no profit. You won't raise enough lambs to pay the expenses. So it's pretty important to keep them out. And I have tremendous respect for these coyotes. They're the most worthy adversary I know. They're more resourceful. They're smarter, but it keeps life interesting. We catch them and we make a living.
So, you know, the sheep that have been here for 100 years, they have had those challenges, and those challenges have molded their genetics because they've been here so long.
Right. Do you do grain feeding as well?
We do, not in environment like this. It's only in extreme cases, like when in extreme drought. If you're a good manager, or we feel like in good, proper management, if you have the type of range land that is in good shape, on year in and year out, you shouldn't have to supply that supplement, or you definitely don't want to substitute what's out here. If you're in a situation where you're substituting, then you generally have too much livestock for the environment. But what we will do, as these lambs that are growing up here now start entering into the June time period, the predation increases the more time they're out on the land. They're so delicious for everything that everything starts figuring out how to get them. And so the longer they're out on the rangeland, the more pressure there is. And we will pull those animals off of their mothers and put them in a safer environment, because the younger ones are the ones that face the largest threat. And so we can put those in a grain-fed environment, and we can, you know, provide the nutrition that they need, and they're protected. We can monitor them so much better, and it actually takes the load off of the rangeland as well. So it's multifaceted. So they're born like the end of March, and we can start pulling them off their mothers, weaning them in June.
Well, I mean, the reason we're pulling them there is the Muslim holiday, the feast days. Our horned, unblemished ram lambs bring a real premium at certain Muslim feast days, and they will pay so much more, and that's the situation right now. We haven't had that in the past.
What is the loss like for your herd, like for a year with predators? How much do y'all lose? Is it substantial, or is it?
The losses can be, if you're not paying attention, you know, they can be 100% loss. You know, if you're not paying attention, it's something you work all year round to create the environment to where this is a nursery for these babies, and you work all year round to prepare for it. And as they're weaned and you've got them in that safe, your pressure, or your job isn't over creating that environment. You're working at that all year round. And so we're increasing our knowledge on how to use these guardian animals, like guard dogs and guard llamas and guard donkeys, to create that environment, because now you're seeing the transition of land use where you have pockets of producers, and so you've got, you know, an island of a producing area, and then, you know, recreational area or a subdivision, you know, with housing developments, and coyotes do very well even in the metropolitan areas.
Yep.
So you're kind of an area that you're fending off your livestock by yourself. You don't have a community help with that. So, and guard animals can be a very good tool in that circumstance.